I still remember the way the sun looked that morning, filtered through the thin mist that clung to the fields, and how the air smelled of grass already warming under the promise of summer. Beyond the meadow stretched the forest, tall and endless, its green shadows pulling at my imagination. It was my idea to go there, though my friends would later remind me of that fact over and over, as if everything that followed had been written the moment I said we should explore the woods. We were three: myself, Anna, always the one urging us toward new places and experiences; Daniel, steady and quiet, the voice of caution that we usually ignored; and Emily, whose laughter could turn even the darkest silence into something lighter. We carried nothing of importance, only small backpacks with sandwiches, bottles of water, and the old flashlight Daniel insisted on bringing. I teased him for being paranoid, but he only shrugged and said I would thank him later. The entrance into the forest was nothing more than a thin trail, half hidden as though nature meant to keep it secret. The moment we stepped beneath the trees, the noise of the world behind us faded away, replaced by the layered sounds of birds, leaves shifting, and twigs breaking underfoot. It felt like walking into another world entirely. At first it was magical, as though we had discovered a forgotten story. Emily skipped ahead, humming and spinning in circles. Daniel moved carefully, watching where he stepped, while I walked in between them, caught between thrill and unease. Shafts of sunlight pierced the thick canopy from time to time, painting bright golden pools on the forest floor where dust floated like tiny stars, and in those moments I felt certain we had crossed into a fairy tale. We had no map, no plan, and that was the charm of it. When we came across a stream, we followed its curve. When a fallen log blocked our way, we climbed over it, laughing when Emily slipped and smeared mud across her jeans, declaring it the tax of adventure. Hours passed before any of us realized how far we had gone. The trees grew denser, their trunks dark and wet, the air cooler, the light dimmer. The path had long since disappeared, leaving us with nothing but moss, roots, and instinct. That was when Daniel stopped and said we should turn back. I pulled out my phone to check the time, but there was no signal and no map to show where we were. I forced a smile and told them it was fine, that we would find our way back, but inside my chest a small unease had begun to stir. We pressed on, though slower now, the silence around us deepening. The forest no longer felt friendly. Strange sounds reached us, not like birds or squirrels but heavier, distant cracks of branches, wings that seemed too large to belong to anything we knew. Emily was quiet now, walking close beside me, and Daniel kept glancing over his shoulder. It was then we found it, half buried in moss and dirt, a stone, taller than my knee, with markings carved into its surface. They were sharp and spiraling, not letters we knew but symbols that seemed to shift if you stared too long. Daniel knelt and brushed away the leaves, his face unreadable, and Emily crouched beside him, her fear momentarily forgotten in curiosity. I could only stare, my heart pounding in my chest, because the moment we saw that stone, the forest went silent. No birds, no wind, nothing but us and the strange, impossible markings. And in that stillness I understood that we were. Daniel was the first to speak after what felt like an eternity of silence, his voice low and strained as if he feared the trees themselves might be listening. He said we should leave the stone alone and turn back immediately, but Emily protested, her eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and excitement, insisting that this was exactly why adventures were worth taking, to stumble upon things no one else had seen. I stood between them, torn by the weight of Daniel's caution and the spark in Emily's words, my own heart racing faster with every second we lingered near the carved rock. The symbols seemed to draw me in, twisting slightly as though alive, and though I told myself it was only my imagination, I could not look away. Finally, I reached out and touched the cool, damp surface. The instant my fingers brushed the stone, a sharp shiver ran through me, as if the forest air had turned to ice. Emily gasped and leaned closer, asking if I had felt that, but Daniel pulled me back with more force than I expected, his hand gripping my arm tightly. He was pale, and his jaw was clenched, and he muttered that something about this place was wrong. For once, I didn't argue. We tried to retrace our steps, choosing what we thought was the same direction we had come from, but the forest felt different now, unfamiliar and warped, each tree too much like the last, every path splitting into another. The light shifted strangely too, as though the sun no longer moved in its natural arc but instead filtered down in beams that led us deeper rather than back. After an hour, Frustration began to crack through Emily's optimism. She stopped laughing, stopped humming, and instead asked over and over if we were lost. Daniel didn't answer. He only walked faster, the flashlight bouncing against his backpack, though it was still daylight. I knew he was thinking of nightfall, and so was I. As we pushed forward, the silence pressed heavier against us, until the faint sound of running water reached our ears. Relieved, we followed it, believing that a stream could lead us somewhere familiar. The sight of water glinting between the trees lifted our spirits, but as we drew closer we realized the stream was unlike any I had seen before. Its surface shimmered with a faint silver glow, as though reflecting a moon that was not yet in the sky. Emily knelt to touch it, her hand hovering just above the surface, but Daniel stopped her again, his voice sharp, almost angry now, telling her not to. She rolled her eyes, but even she seemed unsettled by the unnatural gleam of the water. We filled our bottles anyway, too thirsty not to, and I couldn't shake the thought that maybe Daniel was right, maybe everything here was not meant for us. As we continued along the stream, hoping it would lead out, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The stone symbols we had seen earlier were carved again, faintly, along the rocks near the bank, half hidden by moss and mud. It was as though the markings followed us, repeating endlessly like a secret language written by the forest itself. Emily tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked, and I knew she felt it too, the sensation that the forest was alive and aware of us. By the time the sun began to dip lower, shadows stretching long and cold across the ground, we still had not found a way out. Every direction felt wrong, and when I turned back toward the stream it no longer flowed the way I thought it had, curving in the opposite direction, as night was approaching, and the forest seemed to breathe differently as the shadows stretched longer, heavier, until they swallowed almost everything around us. The silver glow of the strange stream was the only light that lingered, but even that began to look more sinister than comforting. We argued quietly about what to do next, each of us speaking in hushed tones as if raising our voices might draw something unwanted closer. Daniel wanted us to stay put and make a camp. Emily insisted that if we kept walking we would eventually find a road or at least another trail, and I, though torn, leaned toward Daniel's plan because the thought of wandering in complete darkness felt worse than stopping. Eventually Emily relented, muttering under her breath that we were wasting time, but she helped gather sticks and leaves all the same. Daniel tried to light a small fire with the matches he carried, but the wood was damp, and smoke rose in thin, weak spirals without flame. After several attempts we gave up and sat close together in the growing dark, our bags serving as pillows, our knees pressed tight against our chests. The air grew colder, sharper, and the silence of the forest deepened until every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sent our hearts leaping. I thought I saw movement in the distance more than once, but each time I blinked it vanished, leaving me wondering if it had only been my imagination. Emily tried to lighten the mood, whispering jokes and stories, but her voice trembled and she stopped suddenly in the middle of a sentence, her eyes fixed on the trees. We all heard it then, footsteps. Not ours, not an animal's quick scamper, but slow, deliberate steps on the forest floor, crunching through leaves, steady and unhurried. Daniel held the flashlight tightly, though he didn't turn it on, as if afraid the beam would reveal more than we wanted to see. The steps grew closer, then paused, then shifted again, circling us in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. None of us moved or spoke, barely daring to breathe. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, it was impossible to tell, before the sound faded, swallowed by the endless black. When it was gone, Emily finally let out a shaky laugh, insisting it had to be an animal, but her voice was too high, too quick, betraying her fear. Daniel didn't say anything, his eyes scanning the darkness, his jaw tight. I wanted to believe Emily, but deep down I knew those steps had not belonged to anything with four legs. Sleep came in restless fragments that night, broken by dreams of twisting symbols and whispers in a language I couldn't understand. Every time I opened my eyes, the darkness pressed closer, thick as velvet, suffocating. At some point I thought I saw the faint outline of the stone again, glowing faintly among the trees, but when I blinked it was gone, leaving only shadows. When morning finally came, it brought little relief. The forest looked different in daylight, but not kinder. The trees loomed higher, the stream glowed faintly even under the sun, and the markings along its banks seemed sharper, clearer. We were exhausted, our nerves frayed, but we had no choice but to keep moving. Daniel led the way, his shoulders rigid. Emily walked close behind me, unusually quiet, and I tried to convince myself that the strange events of the night had been nothing but fear twisting our senses. Yet as we followed the stream deeper into the forest, I felt it again, that we were being guided, not lost at all. The fourth day in the forest began with a heaviness that clung to us like mist, a weight that no amount of sunlight could burn away. My body ached from the hard ground and the restless sleep, and though the morning air was cool and clear, there was no freshness in it, only the same damp, watchful silence. Daniel kept his pace steady, his eyes fixed on the stream, while Emily trailed close behind, her usual spark dimmed, her face pale and drawn. I tried to keep us together, forcing myself to speak with confidence I didn't feel, but the truth pressed hard inside me. The forest no longer felt like a place we had entered, but like something we had been absorbed into, and it was deciding where we went, not us. Hours passed without change, the same trees, the same moss, the same impossible symbols etched faintly into rocks and bark as though the entire forest spoke in one language we could not decipher. I tried to ignore them, but sometimes when I blinked, I thought I saw the lines shift, curl, and form new shapes, as if they were rewriting themselves while no one looked. Emily noticed too. Once she grabbed my arm, whispering urgently that the markings had moved, but Daniel silenced her sharply, insisting that fear was playing tricks on us. Still, I saw the way his jaw clenched tighter with every step. The sound of the stream was our only guide, yet it grew stranger the further we walked. Its flow no longer seemed natural. The water shimmered in a rhythm, almost pulsing, as though it carried something more than reflection. At one bend in the bank, we stopped, stunned, for there was another stone like the first, larger, its spirals etched deeper and darker. This one hummed faintly, a vibration we felt through the ground more than we heard, and the air around it was cold despite the warmth of the day. Emily reached for it instinctively, but Daniel shoved her back, his voice cracking with more anger than fear as he shouted not to touch it. We argued then, our voices echoing too loudly among the trees. Emily accused him of wanting to control everything, Daniel accused her of not taking our situation seriously, and I stood between them again, my own patience fraying, until all three of us fell silent at once, because the forest had gone utterly still. Not even the strange hum of the stone remained. And then, softly at first, we heard whispering. It came from everywhere and nowhere, drifting on the air like threads of sound woven too thin to grasp, in a language we could not understand. The more I tried to focus, the less sense it made, but the cadence of it was undeniable, like words spoken in secret around us. Emily clung to me, her nails digging into my arm, and Daniel finally turned on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the trees, the rocks, the stream, desperate to find something, anything, that explained the voices. But there was nothing, only the endless green and the spirals staring back at us. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a dizzying chorus, and just when I thought I could not stand it anymore, they stopped. The silence after was worse, heavy and absolute. Daniel lowered the light slowly, his face pale, and Emily began to cry softly, quickly stifling the sound as though afraid it would bring the voices back. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be fine, but the words would not come. I could no longer lie to myself. We weren't just lost. The forest wanted us here, and the deeper we walked, By the time the fifth night fell, I could no longer tell if the forest was changing or if it was us. Hunger gnawed at us, and though we still had a little water, none of us dared drink more than a few sips of the stream that glowed like liquid silver. Our footsteps dragged, our voices were rare, and when we spoke it was only to argue in whispers about which way to go. Daniel had become obsessed with following the stones, convinced that they formed a path that would eventually lead out. Emily resisted at first, terrified of them, but her fear was fading into exhaustion, and in the end she followed because she had no strength left to fight. I followed too, though something deep inside me warned against it, because even when my eyes closed I still saw the spiral spinning, drawing us forward like magnets. The forest was darker than it should have been, as though the canopy had thickened above us, blocking out even the moon. Daniel's flashlight was our only guide now, and its beam trembled as his hand shook from fatigue. Yet each time it fell across one of the marked stones, we saw the carvings flare faintly, as though answering the light, pulsing like a heartbeat. We passed stone after stone, each larger than the last, until finally the path ended at a clearing none of us had ever imagined. At its center rose a massive pillar of rock, taller than any tree, covered completely in spirals that glowed faintly blue. The air around it hummed, thick and electric, raising the hairs on my arms. None of us spoke at first. We only stood there, caught between awe and terror. Then the whispers returned, louder than before, not around us but within us, inside our heads, weaving through our thoughts. I dropped to my knees, clutching my skull, but there was no shutting them out. They weren't words we understood, but they carried meaning all the same, summoning, welcoming, binding. Emily screamed, her voice cutting through the night, and the glow of the pillar surged in response, brighter and sharper until it painted the clearing in cold light. Daniel tried to pull us back, dragging Emily by the arm, shouting that we had to run, but my body felt rooted to the ground, my chest tight, my heart pounding as though it belonged to the stone itself. In the glare of the spirals, I thought I saw figures moving along the edges of the clearing, tall and thin, their forms half hidden in shadow, watching us with patient stillness. I could not breathe, could not think, only stare as the stone's glow pulsed faster, matching the frantic rhythm of my heartbeat. Then, all at once, the whispers stopped. The silence was so sudden it rang in my ears, and the light of the pillar dimmed to a steady glow. Emily was sobbing, Daniel stood frozen, and I felt something shift inside me, as though part of me no longer belonged to myself. The forest was no longer just trees and shadows. It was alive, aware, and it had chosen us. Whether as guests, prisoners, or something else, I did not know. All I knew was that there was no way back, not anymore.